All right, now let's introduce some complexity in this example. So I'm going to define another property called default location, set it to an object like this. Also, let's define another method, compute optimum location. We set this to a function. And here we're going to do some magic. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're going to call this method inside of the draw method. So we call this dot compute optimum location. Now there is a problem with this implementation. Let me show you. So here, when we create the circle object, circle dot, these are the members of our circle object. Not all these members should be accessible to me as the consumer or the client of this object. For example, what would happen if I set default location to false? That's going to completely mess up with this object. Or as another example, maybe this compute method should only be called inside of the draw method. So if I accidentally call it here, circle.compute optimum location, maybe this will put this object in a bad state. And then if I call circle.draw, we're going to get a weird error at runtime. So in object-oriented programming, we have this core concept called abstraction. Abstraction means we should hide the details and complexity and show or expose only the essentials. In this particular example, we should hide this property, default location, as well as this method. These are implementation details. These are part of the complexity of this object. We want to hide these from the consumers of this object. Instead, we want to expose only the essentials. That is the radius and the draw method. Let me give you a metaphor. Think of a DVD player. A DVD player has a complex logic board on the inside, but only a few buttons on the outside that you interact with. So what we have on the inside is the implementation detail, and what we have on the outside is the public interface of a DVD player. We want our objects to look like this DVD player. We want to hide all the details, all the unnecessary complexity on the inside, and expose only a few members or a few buttons on the outside. A lot of developers who have not been able to apply object-oriented programming effectively have failed to comply with this principle. Everything in their objects is public and accessible from the outside. And this will bring a number of issues. One issue is that every time you change the implementation of that object, you have to go and modify many different places in your code. For example, let's imagine now this compute method requires an argument. Let's add a factor argument here. With the current implementation, because we can access this from the outside, everywhere we have used this method, you have to come back and pass an argument. So one simple change in the implementation of an object results in a number of changes in your source code. In contrast, imagine if this method was not accessible from the outside. Then we wouldn't have to modify this line. We would only modify line 12, where we have called this function, right? So remember the abstraction principle of object-oriented programming. Hide the details and expose only the essentials. In the next lecture, I'm going to show you how to implement this in JavaScript.